Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Conn Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media. That's A-M-P-I-R-E. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I'll have a story up next day or two about a lot of the new leadership here, the impact of the early goings of that leadership, what it means. And I also talked to Bobby Wagner. A lot of it's going to center around Bobby Wagner. And I did talk to Wagner for about 10, 15 minutes by myself. And at some point I'll play that on the podcast. And it's just an audio. So the YouTubers, just so you know, but it was a good interview with him talking about leadership, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So stay tuned. I'll play that at some point in June. Not sure when, maybe next week. Also next week, I'll be joined by ESPN's Louis Riddick. So stay tuned for that as well. And on Friday, I'll be joined by the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein. Lot going on, lot to discuss. So I wanted to bring all these folks on. And also, I just wanted to give a quick little shout out. This has nothing to do with anything in particular. And it's not even a paid ad, but a shout out to Catchmark Construction in Chantilly, Virginia, because every time we've gotten some storms here, and every time I see that, I think, thank goodness that they put on our new roof. So, and this is not a paid ad. It's just a guy that I've known for a long time who does really good work. That's Catchmark Construction in Chantilly, Virginia. Anyways, shout out to Steve Catchmark. So anyway, on to football, because that's why you're here. I'm not here to talk about a roof. And we were going to wrap up another day of an OTA session that was very, very hot. We were pushing almost 90 degrees here. I think it was definitely in the upper 80s and quite hot. So you're getting used to football weather already. And it kind of led you to thinking about what's it going to be like in Miami when they have to go down there for a joint practice in August. So we'll be a lot like this, but worse. Anyway, that's fine. It's also one thing you like that I enjoy with these with the OTA stuff. You do see some competition in there, right? And that's obviously Dan Quinn talks a lot about how much he loves to compete. And I would say that when you get into 7-on-7, the competitive side of every athlete takes over. And no matter who's coaching, it's going to get like that. So it's not just because they have the change of coaches. I think there's a lot of other things that come with that. But when you get to one-on-one situations, or you play, you have an offense versus a defense, those guys like to compete quite a bit. Anyways, we saw it today. I'll get to some of that stuff in a minute involving Terry McLaurin. And Terry was a bit pumped up about some things today, Jahan Dotson in particular. So stay tuned for some of those observations. Anyways, I'm going to start with Jayden Daniels today, because why not? This guy's sort of important here. So one of the things again, we talked to vets about him, and they've now been around him for a week and a half or so. And so some of the things you hear about him is they'll talk about his poise. Bobby Wagner's talked about that, his composure. John Allen was talking, I've had the podcast yesterday talking about the work he's put in, and John Allen brought that up. They've all brought that up. And it's funny because they do get smiles on their faces when they start to talk about him. So there's a noticeable liking of Jayden Daniels already. And one of the things John Allen was talking about, how he gets here really early, and Jayden is always here before him. And I asked him after he got done talking to us, I asked John, just like, well, what time do you get here? He goes, 6:45. The bastard's here already. And he's joking, of course, about, the term, but not joking about the fact that Daniels is already there. So that's how you win in the NFL. That's how you become a really good quarterback. And one of the guys too was talking about, I think it was Wagner, was talking about how, like, don't be afraid to be great. And just as some advice to him, which is good, because you don't want to be, you need to embrace that. I do think what Daniel's done pretty well is not put himself above anything. And I think that's very smart. But the poise, the composure, the work, that's what you're doing. That's how you impress vets. Then you go on the field and you take what you learn and you take what you can do out there, and then you impress them even more. And that's how you win guys over. Anyway, he had one play in the 7-on-7 looks, in 7-on-7 plays where he's looking to the left, goes back to the right, and he hits Jahan Dotson over Mike Davis. Just a dime and a really good catch. Nice job by by Dotson winning at the line of scrimmage. I'm going to get to that again in a minute. And again, that involves Terry McLaurin. So, but the one thing you see with Daniels, he does get the ball out fast. And you see less, certainly at this stage of where he's at in his development in the NFL, compared to where some other young players would be at this point, gets the ball out quicker by and large. And, certainly than a lot of other young quarterbacks that I have seen, has the arm talent. And the arm talent, when people talk about arm talent, it's not necessarily just it's not arm strength. He has good arm strength, not tremendous, good arm strength, but he has arm talent. And the talent comes from the compact delivery and see it go. Like the coaches, when Kirk Cousins was here, would talk about that with him, that he had arm talent. And that's what they would mean is when he's going through his progressions, once you see it, you're going. And that's what Daniels does pretty well. We've seen that out here already. And a couple times he had to scramble, but as soon as he sees a guy, he's getting it to him. And even in the scrambles, like he's not waiting for the guy to get wide open. If there's an opening, he's going to try and get that in there, which is what happened, which is what you do in the NFL. It's not always going to work, because there's one time in the corner of the end zone, I think he was throwing to, I can't remember who it was. It may have been Dax Milne, in the front corner of the end zone, but Caillou Blue Kelly read it right, was not open, and stepped right in front of him. Would have been a pick, but he stepped out of bounds when he got the ball, but a nice play by Kelly nonetheless. Another time, throws back to the middle of the end zone. Percy Butler's there, tips it up, and then Anthony Pittman grabs it. He was throwing to Zach Ertz. So, not everything's going to work out, but I do like that he's always ready to throw, and I think you see that consistently from him. And the funny thing is, we haven't seen a big part of his game, which is the legs. We have seen some scrambles back in 2015 when Robert was still holding on to the job. And it's not just him, but you see it last year too with Howell sometimes, where you're holding the ball a little bit, and those 7-on-7s, you would take off running. Now it's going to happen in a game, but in the 7-on-7, you want to see them get rid of the ball. So even in this situation, I think what's good for them is to go through some of these scramble drills. And so you see, even with you saw it with Mariota, you'd see it with Daniels, where they might take off and scramble a little bit, and they're going to try and throw the ball because we know they can run when it's on air. So you want to try and throw the ball, see what you can do. And I think that's what that kid is doing. What I like is, for a kid, for a young kid, he's going to be 24. For a young man, for a new guy in this league, I think he does a good job of not trusting what he sees and not waiting till a guy is wide open. I mentioned that earlier, but I do think that's important. He's not being cautious. In other words, that's the word I was looking for. He's not being cautious. I think he's being smart. I think he's being, aggressive, but not in a wild fashion, for sure. Patience, another time, good patience on a deep crosser to Ertz. Hits him on the deep out, basically crossing right to left. And Ertz has to go up a little bit for the ball, makes a nice catch. But it's good patience by him, waiting for the route to develop. I know there's no pass rush, so it's 7-on-7, so you should be patient, but you still have to be patient, just going through your progressions, your reads. And again, I point it out all the time. What I like is when he does go through his reads, how the feet match up with the eyes, and that's why the ball is on target most of the time. I've mentioned this before, but these guys, one of the things that jumps out to the staff, I think, is how few balls actually hit the ground. And I can tell you that doesn't always happen. I remember a practice, I think it was not last season, but in 2022, near the end of the year, where you're watching just plays like this, just on air, and a lot of balls hitting the ground. It's like, oh my God, this is horrible. And it was. And you're not seeing that now. So I think that's a good sign. And today in those 7-on-7s, it was pretty much Mariota and Jaden Daniels. So anyways, there you go. Trades, free agents, quarterbacks, and all kinds of adventures await the Commanders this offseason. Looking for an adventure of your own? The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring has you covered. The country's largest ropes course and zipline park, located in Montgomery County, Maryland, is now open. Named Best Amusement Park and Climbing Destination in the DMV 2 years in a row, the Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is perfect for birthdays, corporate outings, groups, and families. With challenges anywhere from beginner to expert, there is something for all skill levels. Anytime you're thinking about reaching new heights, make sure you know before you go. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is the only ACCT accredited park in Maryland or Virginia. Staying on the ground? Give axe throwing a try. You can throw at traditional targets or play any number of interactive games. You can even upload your own image. So there you have it, folks. Climbing, ziplining, axes, food, and bonfires right in your backyard. Reserve your adventure today at www.theadventurepark.com/Kime. That's www.theadventurepark.com/Kime. Dan Quinn said he was asked during his pressure, he talks before practice starts. So when he was asked about Emmanuel Forbes working at returner. And one of the things he did talk about, obviously, is that this is the time of the year where you see what guys can do. And again, it's not a novel approach, but it's absolutely the right one. And I think they need to see what guys can do. You need to put them in situations. Can player X do this? It doesn't mean when you see them out here in the spring, it doesn't mean this is necessarily the plan for them all year. It's just like, can this person do that? So you experiment a little bit. And Forbes was returning kickoffs because he's a very skilled runner in the open field. You saw this in college. It's why he led the NCAA. He set a record for number of pick sixes in college. So that's what you do. And he has a skill, find a way to use it. That's one of the things I really, really appreciate here is they seem intent on what can a guy do? How can they then get him to do it? And that's just good coaching. And again, it's not necessarily novel because a lot of guys say that, but I don't know that everybody always does it, because sometimes when push comes to shove, you're afraid to use it, or some coaches look too much at what guys can't do rather than what can he do, because he's on the roster for a reason. So find a way to tap into what he does. So that's what Greg Williams, I always thought as a defensive coach, was terrific at doing that. Anyway, the other guy that they're doing this with is Jamin Davis. So during, he's clearly still working at linebacker, but he's also working with some defensive end stuff this looks more like in a pass rush situation, right? Certainly not full time because he's, again, working with the linebackers, but he is working with the edge rushers when in some early practice drills, just coming off the ball, some balance drills as a rusher to maintain, to turn the corner and keep your hips, or whatever. And so he was doing that again today. So watched him a little bit. And there was one time where comes off the ball, takes an inside path. And this is just in warmups, right? You're just going against the guy on the other side is another defensive player who's holding the bag as a blocker, right? So it's not like there's no contact a lot in these practices, but you're working on technique, you're working on footwork, et cetera. So Gerald Tapp, the D-line coach, loved how he made this one and just came off the ball, just cuts inside, and just a good footwork, good job by Davis. Then watched him run, and they have one drill where you're coming off the ball, but they have like a big hoop on the ground, and you just got to go around that to maintain your balance, as if you're turning the corner and kind of coming back inside to go get the quarterback, right? And kind of going around the tackle. And in this case, it would have been like a right tackle because you're the way you're dipping to your right. So he did that, and he was off balance in that. Now, I'll be curious to see where is he, if he continues to work there, what does he look like in mini camp even, and then in training camp doing that drill, because it would be a new thing for him. So it's just another way to find, like, what can this guy do? And there were times they'd line him up on the line last year, but mostly in a stand-up position. Not mostly, but it would be in a stand-up position. They would move him around, but this time they're trying to rush, put him down, see if he can do this. Again, I'm recording this on May 22nd. These are times where you experiment with things to see, does this make sense for them to continue this and see what he can do? And you may as well, because you got Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner in there at linebacker, and you want to find a way to see what can Jameis do to help you more, because these guys are going to get the reps, and there's 2 linebacker sets. It's going to be those 2. So how can Davis help you in other ways? And that would certainly be a way that you can get another guy on the field who's a good athlete. He does have good length. He's got 33-inch arms. And just by way of comparison, I looked at like Chop Robinson, for example, edge rusher, 32.5-inch arms. Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who was a 7th-round pick, 33.75-inch arms, so obviously a little bit longer. Jared Verse from Florida State, 33.5. So it's not like it's not tremendous length, it's good length. And that's what you need. So we'll be curious to see if he does there, because again, he is a good athlete, and I think it's very smart to find a way to get him on the field to see what else he can do. It's why Niles Paul years ago moved from receiver to tight end. I mean, it was either going to be there or over to defense, but they moved to tight end because you just want to find a way to keep a guy like that. What more can you do? So. But anyway, so that's what he's doing. But when they went to 7-on-7, to be clear, he was working at linebacker. And then even after those early drills, he went back with his group at linebacker. So that's what he was doing. And there was one stretch where he had one stretch in the 7-on-7 where covering John Bates, good coverage off the line, no separation. Next play looks like man, but then drops into a zone, fine. And then the next play was against running back Jeremy McNichols. McNichols was out to the left, or actually the number 2 receiver on the left. So Davis plays with good leverage, forces, basically shades him, gets on the inside, plays inside leverage. And then McNichols, he forces them to cut outside. That's what you want. And that is exactly what you want from that linebacker in that spot, is to do that. And that's something that he's improved on with, but still once in a while will get beat inside, because that's where the running back wants to go. That's where the big yards are. So if you force them outside, they're going to live with that. If there's a few yards, if it's a 5-yard catch, in this case, there was no catch, but if they will live with that, just because that's where you're not going to get as big a play out there. So anyways, that's what he did there. Going back to Forbes, was working with the first group as a corner in the 7-on-7 again. Let's just see where it goes. And I did tell you last week that they're not going to just hand him the job. So wherever it goes, he's going to have to earn it. But he was working there with the first team. And, there are times where it's like, he's a guy that I want to see more of, and just not measure every little thing. Or not like nitpick every little thing, but see where's the growth, because like when you're facing this is where those joint practices are going to be very telling for him. And by the way, Quinn, we already knew about the Miami one, and they are looking for another one. As I told you, they played the Jets in the first game, in the preseason game. So I don't know if it would be them, or would you have another team come in earlier than them just for some work, or go somewhere. They're not going to go up to Baltimore because they play them during the season. But, is there another team that maybe you can do something with? Anyway, that aside, I would like to see him against some other teams just to measure that growth, because I told you yesterday, like the Baltimore, maybe I didn't, but maybe I told the club members this, but the Baltimore joint practice was very eye-opening for him, and not necessarily in the good way. So we're definitely not in the good way, because you saw him get beat more than you'd like. Anyways, so there was one route he had today where it's good initial coverage against Dammy Brown, cuts back outside on the scramble drill, and Forbes kind of stumbles a little bit, and then Brown makes the catch. Nice play by Brown. Good job by him. Wasn't bad coverage off the snap. It's just scramble drill. And that's part of the NFL too. And it's part of what you got to do. And especially when you're going to go against these quarterbacks here with Mariota and Daniels and Mariota, because obviously they can both do that very well. All right. So Terry McLaurin, I brought him up earlier. And again, competition, right? This is what they like. And he had a nice catch he made a nice catch off a pass from Mariota down the left side. So I was watching another part of the field on this. And then you look at just watching a guy come off the line. And so you don't always see every little thing, but when I look up, it's on the left sideline, and McLaurin's going down. It just kind of reaches out, makes a nice, lunging sort of grab, and was pretty pumped up when he came off the field. Here's basically what he said is, because it was on St. Juste's side, he said he was hyped. He was sitting on the out. I said, we got something for that. So, I didn't see, if there was a fake, I didn't see it. So I apologize. What I do know is he was open. And so clearly he would have gotten St. Just he would have had him bite on something short and then just gets around him. So anyway, now on the pass to Dotson that I brought up earlier on the pass from Jaden Daniels, McLaurin, again, very pumped up and said, and he went over to Jahan very pumped up and said, you're so much better with your hands. And he was talking about at the line of scrimmage and getting away from guys. He was like really pumped up about this aspect for Jahan. So file that away, that if he indeed is better with his hands at the line, kid could have a nice year for himself and then really help. Like I've told you before, like I would not give up on that kid yet, because there's just too much there. He's smooth. He's got ability after the catch. We saw that, we've seen enough flashes of that, especially his first year. And I would not give up on that kid at all. But if he is better with his hands at the line, and if Terry's going to continue to be that pumped up, then I think that would bode well for him as the season gets underway in a few months. So, and the other thing you see out there sometimes too, and I like watching guys like Bobby Wagner. I mean, the guy's like, this is just late May for him, right? He's done this forever and is really good. But sometimes you see that veteran savvy, and I pointed out leadership stuff that he does, and I talked about that last week. But even like little things on watching him, basically he's over Austin Eckler, and Eckler is just lined up inside on the right, third receiver inside on the right, and he's all lined up over him, but he's going to drop into his zone. But you don't want to give that away. So it's like you can start to see as the quarterback gets ready to get it, he's kind of leaning inside so he can get to his spot a little bit quicker. Just one of those veteran savvy things. Now, if a quarterback sees that, well, then you might know he's going to drop inside there. But I think the way he timed it, I don't think the quarterback's going to see that. But he certainly was leaning in that way and got to where it needed to go and took away. In fact, because there was going to be a slant to the other side. And I wish I had asked him this after, because I did talk to him afterwards, but we're not going to go over every play in practice. But I think he clearly noticed something, because when the pass was a slant to the other side, so he got in position he would have made a play on the ball or a tackle for a shorter gain. In other words, he wouldn't have made a play on the ball. He would have made a tackle for a short gain, or would have helped in that area. So veteran savvy. The other thing, Jeremy Chin is a big dude. And I think that's one thing that jumps out too. And it gives you that ability to put him down in the box. Again, as we've talked about before, like Dan Quinn likes to use a lot of three safety sets. And Joe Witt, I would imagine, is going to continue that. And Joe Witt, by the way, has a lot of energy on the field. And I think that's going to be a good thing on that side of the ball, especially because he'll be working with a lot with the secondary. The coaching there, folks, is going to be so much better. And I'm curious to see who gets impacted the most and how, and what is the result in their play, because it's just, I cannot understate how much better I think this defensive staff is this year. And then one other thing there's a couple other things, but one thing from Dan Quinn, there was one point during the 7-on-7, he goes up to I can't remember who it was. It was Bryson Tremaine. That's who it was. That's right. So he goes up to Bryson Tremaine and got his hat on backwards. Tremaine's on the offensive sideline, and he says, "You're walking up to the line. What the F?" He didn't say F. He finished the sentence. "Get up there like you're ready to attack the mother effer." And he didn't say effer. But it was he wasn't happy. Wasn't loud, wasn't overly forceful, but the point was made. And those are the kind of little things that you want to see, right? And listen, we would talk about this stuff about Eric Bieniemy last year, and just like some of the intensity he would bring. So let's see how this plays out. But that's, I think, I think it's good for these receivers. You got to have some sense of urgency, especially if you're Bryson Tremaine and you're trying to earn a roster spot. You're not going to get cut on May 22nd, but you better not repeat those kind of mistakes. Not even mistake, but you better show the urgency to get up to the line and play back. Because one of the things Brian Robinson talked about today is that he just feels they're going to play a lot faster, and he felt like they were going to be use a lot more no huddle than they have in the past. So don't know. We'll see if that plays out that way. They typically aren't going to say a whole lot at this point. And it's funny because people talk about the offense. I remember when Griffin was here in his first training camp, and you're out there watching practice every day. I'm going to tell you, the offense they ran in the opener, the plays they ran looked a lot different from what we saw during training camp, right? I mean, you put in a lot of your offense. It's not like they're putting in it's not like they're putting in a new offense, but they weren't showing everything that they were going to do for sure. So how much of that really happens with no huddle, I don't know, but Brian Robinson says they're going to use a lot more of it this year. So stay tuned and see how that unfolds. John Allen talked today. It's the first time we've talked to him since the season ended, actually before the season ended, because even on the last day of the cleanout day, he did not talk to the media for whatever reason. But I've talked to you about this before, and that we know he was upset during the season. He should have been. It was a terrible season, and guys like him who have been here for a while and keep trying to wait for this turnaround that they knew was not happening. So clearly you would understand the frustration. He does not want to go anywhere. And he even said he's happy. He feels like this whole experience has been reinvigorating, says he loves the coaching staff. Seems happy. He's not, again, he doesn't seem like he wants to go anywhere. So anyway, not that I don't know that anybody was still wondering about that, but you shouldn't. He wants to be here and see where it goes. As far as Mariota, again, I go back to how I think there's a lot of energy with the staff. And Mariota said, he talked to us as well, said that his passion is still there. At times in the past, there have been times in the past it wasn't there, but he likes the staff and feels like that's kind of given him a boost. He also likes Brian Johnson a lot. So, I think that's been good for him. And it seems like he's in a good mental spot to be helpful to a guy like Daniels. So I think that will be good as well, because he's going to have to be. The competition is between Jaden and Daniels. So as soon as we all know that as soon as Jaden shows he's ready, then he's going to be starting. They've told him that. He knows that. And there you go. Finally, again, we talked to Bobby Wagner. I'm going to play my interview with him probably sometime next week or sometime in June, whatever. But one of the things is funny because he was asked about one of the transitions coming to the East Coast. And I think any sports fan can understand this. He said, the biggest thing he's getting used to is having to watch basketball games of teams that he likes at 10:30 at night on the East Coast. So he must be a Lakers fan, because he said, unfortunately, they're not playing anymore. So in these playoff games a little bit earlier, but that is something that he brought up. And I think anybody who is a sports fan can understand that. And if you're on the East Coast and the game's at 10:30, man, is it hard to stay up for those things. So anyway, that's it for me. That's a wrap up of the second week of OTAs that we're able to watch. They still have another practice on Thursday. We will not be out there. In fact, we will not be out there next week. We will be back. There's nothing scheduled, so they'll have it the following week. And then the week after that, they have their mini camp. So that's when we'll be back out there to watch practice. I will have multiple podcasts next week just to keep this going, because there's still a lot to talk about, still interviews I got to play. And so there you go. Anyway, appreciate you tuning in. As always, thanks for listening. Talk to you next time.